If you get a bunch of ministers together telling stories, you'll always hear the story of how if you go out somewhere socially, whether it's, local restaurant or you're sitting on the bus, doesn't matter, and you get to talking to someone, and then they figure out that you're a minister. And then after they explain to you why they don't go to church, one of the reasons that they'll give is, if I went back to church, the roof would cave in. I don't know if it's ever happened. Maybe it has happened, but that expression, if I did go back to church, the roof would cave in, it has some meaning for the people who say it. If you think that you are so horrible, if you think that you are such a bad person that if you were to venture inside your place of worship, that your very presence would cause the place to cave in, I suppose that feels kind of sad to hold that kind of feeling about one's worth in the eyes of God. If you feel that bad, that you going back to church means you wouldn't be accepted, this story that I just read is for you. The picture that you see right now is the picture of the stoning of Stephen. So Stephen, one of the workers in the early church, he was standing out in public, he was proclaiming the good news of Jesus Christ, and he was stoned to death. Stephen is Saint Stephen, seen as the first martyr. And can't really pick out from this picture, but one of the people standing there, not throwing stones, but coordinating the throwing of stones. One person standing there collecting everybody's coats is Saul. Saul, from this story onward to the one we just read, has made it his mission to go and persecute and even execute people who are in the early church. If you think that you're so bad that your coming to a place of worship is going to cause the roof to cave in, you've got nothing on Saul. And Saul ended up being just one of the most influential people in the Christian church. Again, I know it's kind of dark. You can't really see this. It's dark on purpose. But this is a rendering of Saul on the ground, having been knocked off of his horse, there on the road to Damascus. Get a little close up there. I made it a touch brighter. There he is, he's on the ground, he's looking up at the heavens of the sky breaking open. And I want you to think of this moment as the roof caving in on Saul. Think of it as Saul finally reached the point with God where the roof just caved in. And there he is, prone on his back, wondering, what does this mean? That all of the sky, not just the roof of the building, but the roof of the heavens, the dome of the heavens, has crashed in on me, and I am in the presence of the divine. If you think that you're so bad that you walk into a place of worship that the roof is going to cave in, let's talk about the roof caving in on Paul. Well, Saul, who is to become Paul. This is the other part of the story that we'll read at the end of the sermon. It's the part that comes immediately after Saul getting walked blind to Damascus. This is Ananias. He lives in Damascus, and he is a well-respected member of the Way. He is a caring, loving elder of the early church. And he has a vision. He has a dream where God comes to him and says, Jesus says to him in a dream, you know Saul, the one who's been killing Christians? I'm going to send him to your house, and you're to be hospitable towards him. Ananias is not happy about that, and yet that's what happens. This vulnerable member of the Way takes in the most dangerous threat to the church, who's had the roof cave in on him. And this is where I want to make a really important point. We think of the conversion of Saul on the road to Damascus. We think of it as Saul's conversion. Yep. But it's also a moment when the roof caved in on the early church. It's also a moment when the church, the early church, was converted from its inward way of looking at their mission to an outward way of looking at their mission. The story of Saul's conversion is a story about the roof caving in on the early church and how that was a wonderful thing. So in Jerusalem was the Council of Jerusalem. In the early church of the Way, those disciples who were sent by Jesus to go into the world to preach the gospel, they did what any good united church organization would do. They set up a committee, and they met, and they talked about what we can do, what we can't do. And they lost sight of the mission. They interpreted their job as converting the people of Judea and then Samaria to the Way. They, despite having been told again and again by Jesus that he's there for all, they were thinking our mission is to focus on Israel, to focus on who we think God has a covenant with. So, here's a lovely rendering of them that I picked so that you can see they're all kind of turned inward rather than looking outward. They're focused on themselves. Here's another fun one. They're all looking the wrong way. And when Saul gets knocked off of his horse and the roof caves in on the early church, it forces them to look a different way. A way that the book of Acts narrates is not an easy switch. So, what are the reasons why today people may be reluctant to come into a place of worship because they're thinking the roof is going to cave in? I think there's some simple, legitimate reasons. One of them is the exposure. And by that, I mean, not everybody is outgoing. Some people are shy. And when you go into a new place, it may feel like the roof is going to cave in, because how do I make friends with all these people who obviously are friends with each other and don't need any additional friends? How do I go through the front door and know what I'm supposed to do? When I was in my settlement charge in Teeswater, I arrived in the middle of a controversy. Not a big controversy, but, lots of fun. The controversy was the beautiful, solid oak front door of Teeswater United Church had started to rot. and it had to be replaced. Simple enough. But a debate broke out. Should we replace it with another solid oak door, or should we do what some of the newer churches are doing and have a glass front door? And I don't know how many years they were debating that, how long the existing door was rotten on its hinges, but I was just newly ordained, so I was young and naive. I told them what they should do. I know better now, don't worry. But what I explained is, oak doors look great, but for someone who's thinking, should I go in there? They don't know what's behind that oak door. They can't see into the building, literally. They can't see into it. What if I open that oak door and it's actually the door to the worship service going on? How embarrassing would that be? For some people, the idea that the roof is going to cave in if they come to a place of worship means that I don't know what the rules are there. I don't know what I'm supposed to wear. I don't know where I'm supposed to sit. I don't know what I'm supposed to do at all. It's a reasonable concern. One of the other reasons, though, is of a burden. Maybe some people, maybe you're carrying a burden that you think that you've done something so horrible that you're not worthy of going into something they call God's house. And maybe you have done something that's horrible. Maybe you've done prison time. Maybe you've hurt others. And the idea of going to a place that is sacred doesn't feel right. And so it makes sense to say to yourself, if I were to go into that church, the roof would cave in, as though God wants to punish. One of the other reasons, though, is carrying a burden of a fight with somebody that you had at the church. And if I came back to church, the roof would cave in, meaning I'd get the hairy eyeball and the fight might continue. The third reason, though, is some people have been hurt by the church. Some people have been told that they don't belong here. Some people have had it made very clear to them that your kind is not welcome here. And they may not have heard that message here, but that doesn't matter. We're part of a larger organization. They may have heard it elsewhere. And the idea of going to church is, it's already caved in on me once. And it hurt, and it broke my back, and it broke my heart. Fool me once, but not again. Those are legitimate reasons. By saying that Saul's conversion was really about the roof caving in on the church, I mean that it was great that the roof caved in. What I'm saying is, if you're worried about coming to church, that the roof may cave in, please come and make our roof cave in. Because that will expose us to be able to see beyond our four walls and remind us that we're not the end all of how one is to be a Christian. If you come here and you help to cave in the roof on us, you are an expert in grace. You know what it means to worry about people and their well-being. And you'll meet other people here who have been blessed by God's grace. And by your coming here and helping our roof to cave in, we're going to be reminded of God's grace rather than our own insular self-preservation. And if you've been hurt by the church and you come here and you help us to cave in our roof, then you're going to help us to see past ourselves and to shed some light on the ways that we have shamed those who have been told that they are not children of God. The story of Paul, his conversion from being Saul, is a story of the roof caving in, not on him only, but a story of the roof caving in on the church. When Saul was recovered from his injuries, he went on to bring the gospel beyond what the church thought were the limits throughout the known world. And we're here because of that. Here's what happened after he got knocked off his horse. Now there was a disciple in Damascus named Ananias. The Lord said to him in a vision, "Ananias," and he answered, "Here I am, Lord." The Lord said to him, "Get up and go to the street called Straight, and at the house of Judas, look for a man of Tarsus named Saul. At this moment he is praying, and he has seen in a vision a man named Ananias come in and lay his hands on him so that he might regain his sight." But Ananias answered, "Lord, I have heard from many about this man, how much evil he has done to your saints in Jerusalem. And here he has authority from the chief priests to bind all who invoke your name." But the Lord said to him, "Go, for he is an instrument whom I have chosen to bring my name before Gentiles and kings and before the people of Israel." You never know when a Saul is going to show up into our congregation and help the roof cave in. And you never know when we get to be like Ananias and do the dangerous thing of looking past where the roof line was before it caved in and trusting that God is up to something with anyone. Amen.